Okay, now we're starting. Hello, MVLA parents and students. This session is a webinar, so we are going to turn on Spanish interpretation for our families. To watch the webinar in English, you will disregard these instructions. Jessica, please share with families how to enable interpretation. I will share a slide, and there's also going to be a quick poll if you could take that. So I'm going to share my slide. And I am going to start a poll. So if you are in here, if you could please take the poll. And Jessica, if you could unmute yourself and describe to parents how to switch over our students into Spanish.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Jessica Ramírez y voy a ser la intérprete para el español el día de hoy. Si por favor pueden seleccionar abajo en el globo y escoger el lenguaje de español.
Okay.
Laura, I am sorry, I am not able to see the Spanish channel for me.
Oh, I haven't assigned you yet.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready for me to send you over there?
Yes, I will.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I will continue to put things into the chat. So without further ado, I will pass the table over to Chuti, our wonderful presenter, to take it from here.
Thank you so much, Laura. I am seeing the poll on my screen. Can I close out of that, or is that?
Yes, you can.
Oh, great. Perfect. Awesome. Just wanted to make sure I didn't mess anything up. Excellent. Well, hello, everybody. Let me now go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so here we go. That should be it. And it looks like we are good to go. Everything looks good? Thanks, Laura. And gracias, Jessica, for your interpretation too. Hablo solamente un poquitito español, and I could not do this whole thing in Spanish, I can tell you that. Thank you all for having me. I am very excited to help all of you MVLA district families to navigate this college testing landscape, which can seem a little bit confusing and sometimes a little bit overwhelming, actually. So my company is Compass Education Group. We pride ourselves in providing the highest quality one-on-one and group test prep education, and then also academic tutoring as well. And we serve thousands of students annually, not only in California. I know you all are up north of me. I'm in the Los Angeles area, but also in the large districts, not only of Los Angeles and San Francisco, but New York City, Chicago, the DC metro area, and believe it or not, all over the world via Zoom. And if I may say so, we do pride ourselves in having a stellar reputation among student, faculty, and counseling communities. And it's a result of 25 years of very ethical standards, conduct, and helping students of all backgrounds succeed in their chosen fields and where they want to go to college. So I personally have been a part of the Compass team for 17 years. I like to say that I started at 10, haha, not really, but as an SAT and ACT tutor for both the math, science, and verbal sides, and more recently as an outreach ambassador, and that's the role that I'm playing today. I graduated from Northwestern University with a joint degree in political science and economics. Now, before I continue with the main presentation, I know that this subject is not the most exciting. To be perfectly honest, I have rehearsed the presentation in front of my husband and he fell asleep. So if you happen to just zone out at some point, do not worry, because this Compass guide that we come up with every year, the college admission testing guide, is comprehensive. It is a huge encyclopedia of everything you could ever need to know about college testing. My presentation, all of the information is in that guide. So you could choose to fall asleep and you will still have access to this information. It's available online. You can also contact the Compass office and they will send you a physical guide. I'm very old school. I love to be able to turn the pages and go, so feel free to do that. Now, college testing, we wonder how important is this? So we hope it is that college standardized tests aren't as important as, let's say, to help you get into heaven, as in this in this comment. Or, you're not going to be putting your test scores on your tombstone, right? Nothing like that. We want to put it actually in context. It is a way of keeping your options open. You can also choose not to take them. That's also a possibility, especially in the test-free and test-optional landscape that we have. And so we'll look at that. But in light or in the spirit of this countdown to college night, here's a testing to-do list that you can, think of in your mind. Just check the boxes off as you cover these bases. So one thing you want to do is just understand the evolving role of these tests. Do they matter? Don't they? How can they help you? You also want to research what are the policies regarding testing at your targeted colleges. So you may be interested in certain sports programs or theater programs. You might be interested in the South or the West or the East, whatever. You might be interested in big colleges, small colleges. You want to do the research on what do these colleges say about what is required regarding testing, because everyone has a different message. Everyone has their own particular philosophy. So you want to keep your nose or ear to the ground on that. Now, in order to figure out which test you're going to take, you're going to need to establish clear baselines on the SAT and the ACT. And as such, you want to take practice tests of both. We'll talk more about that later. And then once you choose a test, you will determine the testing timeline that is best for you, depending on family schedules. Let's say you have a particular sport that is really busy in one season than the other, or you're in a play, things like that. Finalize your test selection and test dates. Select a prep strategy. You may want to use a company like ourselves. You may decide to go solo, get a book from the library or buy one online from Amazon or wherever and study on your own. All of these are valid paths for preparation. But what's important is to prepare somehow, okay? You will invariably do better. And stick to that prep strategy. Then after you've taken it one, maybe more than once, one time, you will decide whether to retest versus when to call it good. Later on, I will cover why it's good to take a test more than once, even if you do no prep whatsoever. And then you will decide finally whether to submit your scores and which scores. That's what's great. That's score choice. So many schools, actually majority of schools, provide that where you can decide, I only want to submit this score because it makes me look really good. You have that option. So let's talk about how are admission tests used? What role do they really play in college admission, right? So this is a graph that was compiled by the National Association of College Admissions Counseling. And it's a very holistic view of how our students, how our potential students looked at as candidates for schools to think, like schools want to see, how is this person going to fit on our campus? Socially, academically, in the community. So they, as you can see, tops are grades in all courses and all grades in college prep courses. Those are the most important things. And then you have other aspects. Admission test scores are up there, number 4. But look at everything else. And it's also depending on the program that you'll be applying to. I mean, you might have an art portfolio that you need to present. You might, I was never an athlete, still am not, but you might be submitting something having to do with sports stuff, right? So the schools want to see a very comprehensive view of you as a person and as a student. So why are standardized tests so high up there, right? Number 4. So let's take a look at grades, okay? This will kind of illustrate why standardized tests still stick around. So one of the biggest thing that the people point to is literally grade inflation. So let's take a look back to 1997. I want to see, can you see my, oh, here, there we go. Now you can see my like as if I'm pointing in front of you, this arrow. So in 1997, these were the average grades according to percentage of students. So and the source of this is the College Board. In 1997, in high school, about 15% their average GPA was in the C range. Okay, we had B's just a little less than 50%. And A's, some variety of A's, A plus, A, and A minus, was at 35%. So next, flash forward 20 years, look at how the percentages changed and the fraction, if you will, of people, students getting C's, B's, and A's. C's decreased, B's decreased, and A's increased. A's were now 42, 43%. Flash forward even more recently, in 2021, look at those A's. You have more than 50%, you have 62% of students getting A's. Then just at 30% B's and then C's, 5%. So imagine you are a college and looking at all these applications and you see lots of A's. I mean, it's confusing. It's like, okay, how do I tell one A from another? That's why standardized tests still stick around and they're still considered a good tool. They're prized for their consistency. And let me show you how that works, okay? You saw the grade inflation, right? Those graphs. Look at this bell curve. This is, these are the average scores in the class of 2017 for an ACT. And it's this bell curve, right? In the middle, you can see most students, like the most popular or frequently achieved score was an 18, and then it tails off towards the end, right? So standardized tests, be they SATs, ACTs, even other standardized tests like advanced placement tests, they are engineered. They call this like the beauty of these standardized tests, if you want to call them beautiful, which is weird. But the beauty of these tests is that they always achieve this bell score. That is how they are engineered. By the way, in light of the popularity of test optional, that phrase and that possibility, right? Many schools, and not only test optional, test free, okay? Test free is a little bit of a misnomer because a lot of these schools are now leaning more heavily onto AP tests, okay? So that's been kind of like a workaround of these colleges and universities, like, oh, we're test free, but then they want you to have as many AP tests as possible. So it's just know that going in, and that's something you will want to talk to in with your counselors in greater detail. Now, note, all of these standardized tests, they are scored on a bell curve. So most students will naturally fall in that center area, right, of the bell, and fewer on each end. The SAT bell curve is slightly different, but it's the same idea. Now, scores are normed to a reference group. And what that means is that a score of, let's say, 18 on an April ACT means exactly the same thing competitively as a score of 18 on another test, on another ACT in another year, another month, etc. So again, these tests are prized for their consistency. So there are a couple of hard truths when it comes to standardized tests. Not every student is meant to get a perfect score. And endless effort does not give you endless reward, okay? Meaning just because you study harder doesn't mean that you'll get a perfect score. They, on purpose, I mean, they have, what do they call it? They call them 1,600 busters in the SAT and 36 busters on the ACT. Problems that are really, really difficult, even for me as a tutor. And they're designed to kind of parse out those higher scoring students. Now, something I want to point out when it comes to prep, the test prep, your expected improvement on a test really depends on your starting point, okay? You'll hear some testing companies or individuals saying something along the lines of, oh, you know, I guarantee that you will get at least a 4-point increase on your ACT, okay? So if you look at, let's say you started at 16, moving from 16 to a 20 over here on the ACT is really different from moving from a 32 to a 36. It is not as easy. So any testing company that might, you know, guarantee this kind of improvement, you have to watch out that there really are no guarantees. And just know that 1 or 2 points of improvement on the ACT when you're on the tail end is much more likely. So moving on to, once you see those bell curves, right? You see that, so then what is a good score? What should I aim for? Well, it really depends on the school that you're looking at. So here is just a sampling of some schools and the number of applicants, their admit rate, their class size, and then in these final 2 columns, you'll see what's called the middle 50th percentile. Okay. By the way, these stats are available on your on the Compass testing guide that I mentioned. That's available online, and also, you know, if you call for something physical. So basically, if you look at this middle 50th percentile, we'll look at the SAT, for example, and let's just take as an example the USC. Okay. So the number of applicants for this past year, you know, freshman class of 2022, there were 71,000 applicants. Admit rate was 13%. Class size, 6,596. So for the SAT scores, the middle 50th percentile, or yes, the middle 50th percentile was 25% of students scored less than 1330. 25% of students scored greater than 1520. And this is out of 1,600. So the middle 50% of students that were admitted, okay, they scored between 1330 and 1520. And what we like to say is, I mean, that's a nice safe zone. Imagine I think of them as, you know, like the goalposts for you're trying to get a field goal and you are hunting. You want to get your football in between those posts. That does not mean that you will automatically get into the college. What it means is that you fit. You are a good fit for the college according to your test scores. And it's a good thing to aim for. Now, speaking of the SAT, you may have heard of rumors, you know, the big news in the testing world that the digital SAT is coming. Well, it is this fall of 2023, the first digital PSAT will be administered, and you no longer can take it via paper. And then the very first digital SAT will be actually a year from now, starting, I believe, January of 2024. So here are the details that you'll want to know about the digital SAT and PSAT. So it debuts for the class of 2025 with what I just mentioned. It is shorter. Yay! 2 hours and 14 minutes at standard time. Time and a half, of course, if you have things like ADHD and other situations. It is taken on a computer or tablet. It is adaptive. And what that means is you'll have basically 2 sections for both verbal and math. The first section or first module will determine the level of difficulty of the second module that you will get. So you will, and I'll show you a chart that illustrates this more succinctly. This has to be proctored in a testing center. You can't take it at home. It is still scored on a 1600 scale and no longer has a no calculator math section. That is awesome. You can use the calculator throughout, just like the ACT. ACT has always had, you can use your calculator throughout the whole thing. Here's something that's interesting. The reading passages have changed. They're only going to be short. No, the long passages are gone. Examples to come. It is also more secure. It's not possible to cheat off another student because literally students will have different tests. And that's how it's designed, especially because it's digital, you have that capacity. And then the scoring uses what's called item response theory. That means that it takes into account your pattern of mistakes, and it will also have varying weights of problems that you get correct or not. So moving on, hold on. Here's an example. I love this. See how Amy Poehler feels here? Well, that's how some of the long passages can make you feel. Those long passages, they're anywhere from 600 to 800 words, and they can be really, really dense. You'll still encounter that on the ACT, no longer on the digital SAT. What you'll see on the digital SAT is this. Short passages. The text will range to only 25 to 150 words. The literature, including poetry, history, social sciences, humanities, science. No more GGC. That's the short for Great Global Conversations. And what that means is there used to be a requirement of having at least one passage that was really like from the 17 or 1800s using just jargon that students aren't typically used to have that. It would be so hard to trudge through that. No more. And then also there are some graphics, tables, bar graphs, line graphs, and there's no more trickiness. This example from The Great Gatsby, take a look at that. It's much easier. And what's nice is that it used to be with the long passages, if you didn't get a passage, it might be history and you hate history and you just zoned out, right? Or it had a lot of Latin terms and it was science and you don't like science, something like that. It would be a disadvantage to you as a student because that could be a quarter of your grade, that one passage. Like, oh my gosh, if you don't get it, you get a lot of those wrong, right? This way, there's a joke in the testing world that, well, if Twitter happens to die off, it will live on in the digital SAT, because if you notice, the passages are pretty darn short. So here's an example or just, an illustration of how the modules work. So adaptive content, reading and writing, you will get that module 1, and depending on how you do your accuracy in that section, it will calculate your performance and give you either module 2A or module 2B. That's how, this adaptive content works. Something else that I want to point out to you also, if you look at the lighter colors of blue or red, those lighter colors mean easier questions. The darker means hard. Notice in the reading and writing, you cannot predict when there's going to be a question that's difficult or easy. It's different in the ACT, and I'll show you that later. So now is a good time. If you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot to think about, these passages, adaptability, blah, blah, blah. Do I even want to consider taking the test? So it can be helpful to talk about test optional. What the heck does it really mean? Well, it's good to know that a majority of four-year universities nationwide have adopted some version of the test optional policy. Test optional literally means, strictly speaking, you can apply to this college without submitting a test score. That's what it means, face value, right? It means that your application is complete without a test, and they're not supposed to dock you off or penalize you for not having submitted a test score. Test optional, by the way, is not to be confused with test blind. Test blind is basically another way of saying test free. meaning admissions offices will ignore scores entirely. Like even if you score 1,600 on the SAT and you're applying to UCLA, they're not going to look at it. You're like, but look at what I got. Nope, totally blind to your test scores, okay? So the thing about test optional schools is that you can submit. So what I suggest to students and parents is to not think of test optional, think of submit optional. There's a difference. What that means is when you take the test, you keep open many possibilities of where you can apply. You just have to decide whether or not you'll submit your test scores, whether or not it shows you in a good light. So continuing on to give you examples of the whole test landscape, take a look at that red slice, okay? Now, this pie chart, it's a sample that includes 416 top US colleges and universities that are widely recognized nationally. So that small fraction, that red slice, used to be 2/3 pre-pandemic. So, the college landscape and the testing landscape has drastically changed. It's now only 3.4%. And I will give you some examples of the colleges that fall into that category. Next category, you have test optional temporary. These are colleges that, whether or not it was because of the pandemic or something that, or they've always been thinking of going test optional, but they're either trying it out. Eventually some of these, they will at some point become permanent test optional. Maybe they'll go over to test required, like Purdue is going to. And then some might even go test free, but they're more in flux. And it's very important, if your school falls in that category, for you to look at the language in their brochures, on their website, in their pamphlets, at the open houses and the tours. What are they saying? There's also the test optional permanent. They have decided that, yes, absolutely, this is going to be our policy. Then finally, there's the test free. You'll see those are small slivers. The test free temporary, there aren't as many, but there are definitely more of the test free permanent. So let's take a look at some of those examples. Colleges that are test free permanently, the whole Cal State system, the whole University of California system, and then these are also examples. So just remember, what this means is that test scores will not be considered at all in the admissions process when you apply to these schools. Now, here's something that's important to remember and know. Just because a school is test-free doesn't mean it's easier to get into. Everyone is making that assumption. It is not the case. What it is it's easier to apply to. My throat just not easier to get in. Okay. So what's been happening is that a lot of colleges have been seeing their the number of applications increase because it's just easier to apply. What that's also done is driven down the percentage acceptance rate. So on the opposite side of the pendulum or the equation are colleges that absolutely require testing. Georgetown University is an example of they never stopped requiring, even throughout the pandemic. Georgetown really just loves their tests, okay? MIT is a particular standout. MIT has a rationale for requiring tests that runs counter to the arguments that standardized testing critics present. So critics, they say that test scores underpredict academic performance among underrepresented students, and then it further widens the gulf of privilege between these students and, let's say, the white wealthy majority, right? That's what the critics say. According to MIT admissions and the research that they have done, they feel that the SAT and ACT provide a far more convenient and inexpensive opportunity for students to demonstrate academic proficiency, especially in math, for example. In comparison to alternative assessments like APs, which I told you earlier, a lot of test-free schools, they're leaning more heavily now on APs. APs, those are more costly. They're only offered once per year. To prepare for those, that can be more difficult. So I'm telling you this because every school has its own personality and philosophy, if you will. So make sure to do your research on that. Now, between those two opposite sides of the spectrum, right? We have the no man's land in the middle. We have test optional, and there are, you know, different gradations of what test optional is. So in this test optional college landscape, we have test additive / test neutral. And I'm going to bring up just an example. I mean, you see all of these possible colleges. Let me just pinpoint Wake Forest. This is straight from their website. For the record, it's not that we think standardized tests are evil. We just think that the measure of your intelligence and potential requires a deeper dive. It's simple. If you think your scores are an accurate representation of your ability, go ahead, submit. If they aren't, don't submit. You won't be penalized. So these kinds of schools, they are not penalizing you at all for not submitting. And it's a very, shall we say, open-minded philosophy. If you feel like it helps you, great. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Now, there are schools in the test optional category that are a little bit more, they prefer tests, you know, the kind of wink at you. It would really be a good idea for you to send a test. So one example is my alma mater, Northwestern. While high school grades are a strong predictor for academic success in college, the combination of grades and standardized test scores has been shown to strengthen that prediction. We will still find value in scores if you choose to send them. They're kind of saying, you should choose to send them because we value it. That's what they're saying, right? And then take a look at Purdue. They're saying, you know, before they were test flexible, and for 2023, they are still test flexible, meaning test optional. But in 2024, they are going back to test required. So again, look at the languaging of the schools that you are interested in. Very, very important. Okay, so now we know it's a good idea to test just to keep our options open. But you're probably wondering, okay, so then how do I choose which test to take? Or maybe I'm going to just decide not to test at all. Okay, and by the way, I know of people who've done that. I have relatives, and I don't have children, but children of my friends who've decided to do that, and it is a very legitimate choice. What I don't want to have happen to any particular student, and I have seen it happen repeatedly, is a student decide, yeah, I really just don't want to deal with that, don't have the time. And the summer after junior year rolls around, let's say they had a great year scholastically, and then they happen to find out some really strong four-year private colleges that are really great in their area of interest. And now it's the summer before senior year, and they realize, oh crap, if I had even just a medium score, moderate score, like in the middle of the 50th percentile, and I can easily achieve that, but I did no prep whatsoever, and there's a panic. I had one student that was in this category. I was hired by them to tutor every single day for a week before the test, before the ACT. And it was so stressful for my poor student. I would not suggest it. We just want to avoid panic, okay? So you just want to keep your options wide open. So which test should you take? By the way, I do not suggest taking real tests, like not practice, but the actual real test of both and preparing for both. That is insane. It's like being, let's say, married to two people, or trying to build two homes at the same time with the same amount of resources. You're shooting yourself in the foot. You won't do well in either. So here is a concordance chart that compares SAT and ACT scores. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a practice test or use your PSAT, practice SAT, and take a practice ACT. And let me show you what you'll do. For example, let's say there's a student, they take the practice ACT and get a 22. And then on their PSAT or practice SAT, they get a 1200. You then look at the lines and see where they intersect and notice this is strongly in the blue or favor SAT zone, okay? And that happens for us, or we observe that in about 1/3 of our students where we see a student showing a stronger inclination or strength towards one test. Now, then let's take this other student, for example. They take the practice ACT, get a 31, practice SAT, get a 1400. Now you look at the intersection of those lines, that is straight in that gray zone, okay? That's where it's your judgment call. You get to decide as a student, which test do I hate less, right? Which one is less painful? And I'm going to show you the differences between a couple of differences between the SAT and the ACT. But what's most important is you want to try it out. You want to literally not just dip your toe in the pool. You want to jump in and be like, do I like this temperature? Do I like the layout of the pool? Okay. So let's take a look at the differences in math. And I am including, because there might be some people here who are taking the SAT, the paper SAT soon. So that's why I still have this, this category here or this column here. Look at the difference in time. Just look at the timing. The new digital SAT will have a total of 70 minutes. Current SAT is 80 minutes. Current ACT is only 6 minutes, and it's only one section. So if you don't like math very much, maybe you'll take the ACT. And I'll get into this in a little bit, but if let's say you're really strong in algebra, you love those word problems. Well, the SAT, they're known for that, okay? You look at the numbers of questions. You have here, oops, I'm trying to get my 44 questions in the new digital. Current paper SAT is 58 and ACT is 60 questions. So, and then you have it's 60 questions in 60 minutes, that's 1 minute per question. Whereas with the both forms of the SAT, you have a little bit longer. So these are all things to consider. See what feels better to you. Now I'm going to compare the subject material, I should say math concepts, and that material that is covered. So take a look at the blue column, the SAT. There are a couple of X's there. What that means is those concepts not covered. No direct and inverse variation, no matrices, no ellipse equations, geometric visualization. They don't go into that. So the SAT takes a deeper dive into algebra. Like I said, those word problems that are like, if there's a train going southwest at 40 miles per hour and another train going in the opposite direction, blah, blah. Those kinds of word problems, yes, those are on the SAT. Now the ACT, take a look at that red column. All of those circles, and there's some gradation. The black means that there's a lot. And then the ones that are not filled out, that means that it's there, but it's somewhat infrequent. But the ACT has no X's because the ACT is very wide in scope. It's so it's wide and not as deep as it's a different pool. You know what I mean? It's a more shallow pool, if you will. So that's just a good example of how both tests are different. So here, just take a look at this. This is the digital SAT, the paper SAT, and the ACT. And I've color coordinated each section, right? So the red, those all correspond to covering the same topic material. One quick caveat, the green, if you see the green reading in the paper SAT, that's part of the red, in the verbal portion of the digital SAT, because they no longer split reading and writing and language in the digital SAT. Now, look at both the digital SAT and the paper SAT. A different philosophy, right? Because what you see is all the verbal stuff in the first part of the test, and then all the math stuff in the second part of the test. for both, like, the SAT across the board, digital or paper, that's how they work. ACT is a little different, and I don't know how you are as a person, as a test taker. Everyone's brain is different. You may like doing it like that. The ACT, I like to think of it as a pendulum. It almost keeps your interest up more by making things like you don't get bored. So if you notice, it goes verbal or English, and then math, and then reading, which is verbal, and then science. This is the misnomer, okay, of science. Some people are scared of taking the ACT because it has a science section. You do not need any pre-existing knowledge of biology, chemistry, physics, astronomy, any of those things. All of the information needed are in the passage. What science really is they're like reading passages that happens to be about planets or diseases or genetics or something like that, some sort of scientific topic, but it's a reading passage. And then it may or may not have some graphics, data, charts, things like that. You rarely have to do any math in that section. So again, it's good to note that the SAT basically has a lot more math than the ACT does. Okay, so even though, I've given you this overview. Oh, by the way, the ACT also has an optional essay. Don't even worry about that. No one takes that unless it's required. It's required by literally less than 5 schools, and one of them is West Point. So if you want to go to West Point, just know you'll have to take that essay. But that's pretty darn antiquated. So given all of this information that I've presented to you, we still get crazy, opinions, anecdotal stories or whatever on which test is better to take. So, I've heard some crazy things like some people think one gender is better at one test over more than the other. And really none of that holds water. Yeah, left-handed students born on Tuesdays do better on the ACT. Crazy. So don't worry about any of the crazy rumors that you might hear that are passed along and whatnot. All colleges accept both tests equally. Neither one is better than the other. What's better is that your student or you do well on it and feel better and feel more confident with it. So knowing the difference between the tests, you might be wondering, okay, how exactly do you go about preparing for them? Well, it helps to know what do the tests reflect, and then you can, prepare for it going backwards. So one of the things, of course, is content knowledge. Grammar rules, the Pythagorean theorem, polynomial equations, things of that nature. Then command of strategies. How do you actively read? Do you annotate? How do you figure out and illustrate a math problem? All of those kinds of things. And then emotional discipline. They know that this is a long test and it's stressful, right? If you're bored, if you're in a bad mood, if you're tired, making sure to focus your energies. Definitely emotional discipline. And lastly, clock management, making sure that you pace yourself while you're being economical with time. So here's something that you're going to want to do when you prepare for these tests is know the structure of your test. And here's an example. ACT English. This here is a heat map, okay, of 11 different ACT tests. And there were several thousand ACT test takers. And the green shows that was, there are 75 blocks across, each one representing a question. The green block is easy, the red is hard, and yellow is moderate. What does this tell us? It tells us there's no rhyme or reason to easy, moderate, and difficult. And what that means is you need to keep your maintain your pacing throughout. You don't want to poop out. You might have some easy questions towards the end that could have been really good, easy points, right? Making sure that you don't get derailed by a single question. One question isn't worth more points than the other, right? ACT English, that's the very first section that you encounter when you take the ACT. ACT Math is the second section that you encounter. Now take a look at this heat map. 60 questions, right? You can basically, roughly divide it into, it's like the first 20 are easy, second 20 are moderate, and the final 20, 41 through 60 are difficult. That's pretty much how it washes out. So even if you do no test prep, all you students who want to take the ACT, listen up. This is what you want to do, okay? Let's say you're someone who doesn't really like math. It's not your strongest subject, whatever. And when you take your practice test, maybe those questions 41 through 60 are pretty darn hard. You get very few of them right. Here's what you do. Of the 60 minutes that you get, take 59 minutes and only answer questions 1 through 40. Concentrate on those. That is your wheelhouse, right? And then that last minute, go ahead, just pick one letter, your favorite letter. I pick C for Judy, and you will actually better your score just by doing that, okay? Now, let's say you are a higher scoring student, you love math, and those difficult, the red questions, you love them. They're a lot of fun, or it's like a game to you. I have students like that. So what you want to do is, the mistake for something like this is to think, oh, wow, 60 minutes, 60 questions, 1 minute per question. Wrong. The easy questions should take you a lot less time. So let's say roughly you could do 15 minutes on the first section, 20 minutes on the second, and then 25 minutes or more on the last. Again, it will immediately up your score, even if you don't review math concepts. So please remember these things. Now, given all this information on the test that I've thrown at you, test optional, college policies, you may be wondering, where do we start? Okay, so let's take a look at a suggested timeline. Now, please note that this is only a suggested timeline. You can alter it according to your own personal needs, whatever your strengths, that kind of thing. I always want people to take into account, do they have family travel coming up? Do they have are they big into football? So then all of fall is out. You need to know what your limitations are. So 11th grade fall, you get established baselines for the SAT and the ACT. And then you target spring approximately for your very first standardized test. Now, take a look at that box here. When do students take their first official standardized test? Only 1/6 takes it in fall of junior year. A majority, 2/3 take it in spring of junior year. And then 1/6 of students take it, in our experience, summer. This is the very first time, remember, that they take a test in the summer or fall of senior year. That time frame, please make sure to give that as a possibility for when you're taking the test, because what we've noticed is that as students just get older, as they age and as they mature, they have encountered more material, they've ingested more information and more strategies just naturally. They're more mature, more confident, and you do better naturally. Even when students don't do prep, they will naturally be stronger at that time period. So you will ideally want to do, let's say, 3 to 4 months of prep. And what that is 3 to 4 months review and whatnot, and a month of diagnostic tests and things of that nature. So something else to consider when scheduling is super scoring. And I mentioned this earlier about the importance of the possibility of taking the test more than once. So let's say you have a student. They take the ACT in April, get a composite score of 26, and then take it again in June, composite score of 26. Same score, right? But look, their scores in math and reading are 27, which is higher than they were in June. And then in June, the English and science were higher than they were in April, just by virtue of super scoring, which is something a majority of colleges do. Super scoring, this student, by doing no prep whatsoever, they get a composite score of 28. That's why it's important to allot the possibility of taking a test. They also do this with SAT, taking a test more than once. So I just want to let you know how my company and other test prep companies can help we at Compass, we have published resources and events. The website, which is just compassprep.com, it will have everything there. Presentations such as mine right now. You can see others that dive deeper into certain topics and subjects. Complimentary consultations, feel free to email, call, they will answer your question. No question is stupid. Now, diagnostic exams and score reports, very important. The score reports that Compass provides is they are phenomenal. I'll show you an example. We also offer group classes, which can be an affordable option. And then, of course, one-on-one tutoring. Here is how you can contact us. Now, I mentioned the practice tests. Compass offers live proctored tests in person and online every weekend for a nominal fee. We have a special offer for you guys, MVLA district, a free practice test for students. Typically, a practice test is $50. And if you use that code there, ACT23, you get a free ACT practice test and SAT23 for a free SAT practice test. Also, should you choose to take a self-administered test, that's where you just time yourself, you take it at home and whatnot on your own time and there's no fee for that. So here's a quick example. I just want to rush through this so I can get to some of your questions. The score reports are very, very detailed. They tell you what kinds of things you tend to get wrong, what subjects, what like math topics or what grammar topics, English topics, things of that nature. And then also how you score compared to similar scores, which helps because like if you are compared to similar scores as yourself, if you get something wrong and everyone else got it right, well, that's like kind of a dumb or silly mistake. Whereas if everyone else in your kind of score range got a question wrong, that means you're on par. To improve things like that, you just know that it'll take a deeper dive to improve those areas in math, science, English, or reading. So I also wanted to cover the group classes. They're a more affordable option. And also, should you enroll or choose to enroll this, please mention MVLA, that code, and you will get 10% off the $895 all-inclusive fee. What the group classes are, it's 20 hours of instruction, 5 practice tests. The class sizes are small, a max of 15. It's a really wonderful option. So, and finally, I just want to show you and remind you, go for it. Go ahead and click on and download that guide or order one physically. And I have in my signature on my emails a Chinese proverb that teachers open the door, but you must enter by yourself. And that is something that we hope to do at Compass, open doors to an amazing future via making sure you have options to attend the best college for you. And hopefully we can be part of that process. So thank you so much for having me. Just a reminder, the codes are MVLA, and then ACT23 and SAT23. So please just remember that.
Thank you so much, Shruti. We do have a few minutes for Q&A. Can I ask some of you?
Absolutely. In fact, I guess, I guess I can stop the share. Should I do that?
Well, there is one question that happened pretty early. Can you go back to the slide with the new upcoming features of the SAT? Maybe we could sit on that slide.
Yes, you bet. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do that right now. And I'm going to go, okay, the SAT, yeah, that's really early. Yep, right here. There we go. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay. So another question that came up was, even though the 1600 scale isn't changing, do you anticipate these changes in the SAT testing format to alter potential results? And how might this impact current college admissions baselines?
Okay. How it is supposed to be engineered is that it should have no change. The baselines should remain the same. what they have tried very, very hard to do is that, let's say, a 1350 on a paper-based test, SAT test, is a 1350 on the digital test. And it has taken, I mean, they've been researching and testing for years, making sure that there is a seamless transition, because they don't want to penalize. I mean, it would be so unfair, you know what I mean, to penalize someone for having taken one or the other. So that is what is supposed to happen. Now, I will admit what I am seeing. There are two camps. Some people, it's kind of like when electric cars first came out, some people are like, let's go and jump on board. And other people are like, let me wait and see. I want all the kinks ironed out. You have both camps. So you have some people going, oh my gosh, thank God that it's finally on digital. It'll be so much easier. And then some people are like, yeah, well, let me just stick with the ACT because at least it's paper. I mean, I had one student tell me that she's like, yeah, I would prefer that because it will be different taking it. You'll have scratch paper that you can write on for the digital SAT. But for example, with paper and pencil, you can underline things in a way that it's more difficult to do on a computer. You will have a highlighting mechanism that you can use, but again, it's different. Some people like that very tactile sense.
Great, thank you so much. Would it make sense, what's your opinion on current sophomores, class of 2025? Would it make sense for those students to take the SAT while it is still on paper? So there are more sample tests. What are your feelings on that?
Okay, so that's a really great question. I am not a fan of rushing a student because unless a student happens to be a really strong, maybe academically they're very strong, and that their test taking ability, their prowess they're just a naturally good test taker, because there are those who are like that. Then great idea, go for it and try it out. However, I want to say majority of students, the sophomore year is way too early to take a standardized test. You haven't covered enough material. I'd say it's way too stressful.
Great, thank you. I support that. Is the Compass free SAT practice test in the old format?
So both are available. You can take the digital and the paper. So either one.
Fantastic. Okay, and our last question. How many times do you think a student should take the test?
Oh, this is such a great question. So I just had a student, or have a student. Well, I should say had, excuse me, because she doesn't have to study with me anymore. And she only took it once. And so excited because she got a 1480. We're still over the moon. She had been shooting for a 1300. And I'm so proud of her. So here's the thing. She was ready to take it to maybe 3 times. She was really hoping not for 3. Of course, you want to hope for a situation like this particular student. It doesn't always happen. I have a student, did I mention this? I can't remember. Sorry if I'm repeating myself because I use this story a lot. My student scheduled his ACT the morning after his prom. And yeah, he ended up taking it 2 more times. So here's the thing. Majority of our students tend to take it twice just because of that super scoring. That's really, that's magic sauce, right? We do not suggest taking it multiple times. In fact, what we will do, not only test taking, but even test prepping. We're not a company that's like, sure, prep with us forever. No, students' brains and their stress level, it can get too great. At a certain point, we're like, yeah, no, we think it's detrimental to the student to keep on taking the test and to keep on doing prep. Because at a certain point, there is no more return. And the return that you're getting, it's not positive, it's resentment and stress. I see it happen. So ideally, 2 is great. There's nothing wrong with 3. 3 is also very solid. Any more than 3, you have to take a good hard look, talk with your counselor. the student, you need to like, is it that you didn't do any prep and now you're going to do more prep and you're positive that, oh my gosh, if I just put an hour a day, oh, that's way too much time. Oh my gosh. But anyway, if for some reason you think you can get your score higher, great. But really, these tests again are supplemental. In fact, I always tell my students, if they tell me, oh, I couldn't do any homework this week because I had 3 papers, an exam, a presentation, I'm like, your schoolwork is number one. Always, 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 always. So just know that that's how tests are. Tests, you saw it was number 4. And same thing in prep. Homework for school is always more important than test prep, always.
Okay, and there were just a couple more questions than the Q&A, but I'll take those. Please come to see us in the College and Career Center to make a plan about yours. Have your student come see us to make a plan around how they send their test scores when they apply to colleges and what makes most sense. So there's just a question about timing. Students would choose to send their test scores when they actually apply. So I'm gonna just give you a huge round of applause. I know all of our participants are very grateful, and we will share the recording out with our community and with you. And we just cannot thank you enough for your expertise and your time. Okay, everyone, you have about 5 minutes before the next session starts. Thank you, Shruti. Have a wonderful night. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.